Hi, everybody. My name is Daniel. I play Ubar. I am recently returned to the town crier for Gemstone, and this is the first interview session for my second run. I did a bunch of these that were text only beforehand, before I took a hiatus. I'm back, and we're trying a different format. So for today, we have well, I'll let you introduce yourself as much as you're comfortable. If you want to do first name, if you want to do character name, whatever you're comfortable with.
Sure. I mean, well, in my case, they're the exact same pretty much. I'm Jason, otherwise known as Ptolemy, and I'm happy to be here.
Excellent, excellent. Appreciate you doing this. So the format is pretty basic. I'm attempting to split this up 50-50. We're going to
Hmm.
start off with some out of character stuff. This is questions for you, the player, related to your Gemstone experience, looking
Okay.
for stuff that's not actually related to your character, more your impressions and your thoughts. So we'll
Sure.
burn through those. Feel free to back me up. Feel free to veer off if you find something interesting,
All
and we'll
right.
see how it goes.
All right. Sounds good.
So starting off, when and why did you start playing Gemstone initially?
Uh, I was one of the AOL guys, so I want to say, let's see, I got AOL with my first job, which was when I was like 15. So it was either, I think it was like
Okay.
96, 97, something like that. Um,
Okay.
And basically, I'd gotten AOL and I didn't know what to really do with it. And then a Gemstone banner popped up. It was, I don't know, people might remember it. It was one that had like the Conan looking warrior on there and some
Oh yeah.
really jank pixel art of some other characters I don't even remember. And I was like, well, it looks kind of like Dungeons and Dragons. And I really didn't even know what I was signing up for with the internet at the time. It just was like, I want the internet. And so I joined it and then here I am.
Excellent. Excellent. You taking any breaks along the way?
Yeah, I took about 15-ish years off somewhere in there.
That's a decent break.
Yeah, I
It,
mean, more or less like I was just starting out my teaching career and, other things took priority and it was kind of like, well, I got other things going on. I moved a lot more into DMing for D&D and that took up a huge chunk of time too. So I just kind of walked away from it for that reason, and then like a lot of people during COVID, it was like, well, I got nothing really to do at home, so like let's see what's going on with Gemstone. And I would pop in once in a while and more or less expect to see the game have vanished off the internet. Like I
yeah,
would just
yeah.
kind of log in. I would go to play.net just to see if there was still a game existing. And the website never seemed to change. So I used to think that now it's gone. It's just like some legacy website sitting around. But no, I
Gotcha.
mean, I came back well, like other people during COVID and I stuck around.
Nice. Very nice. So it was just curiosity that brought you back during COVID. What was there something that like triggered you to think, hey, what about Gemstone? Something that made you check that out, or was just sort of part of your routine to check in every once in a while?
I don't really remember if I'm being honest. I think what happened was I just kind of was scrolling through the internet. And it's going to sound ridiculous, but it's true. When I left the game, there was real talk about breakage. Like the numbers were in and it was on the table, and it was just a matter of when. And I promised that if they ever brought breakage in, I'd leave
Oh,
because back then it was talking about permanent item, degradation, and
oh
uh,
yeah.
I made a lot of efforts in those early days to get like an Anor weapon, which probably is going to aggravate people how I pronounce things, but I don't really care. Um, and the reason I got it was because it had a 99 strength, which meant that you had to. I still remember the mechanics because I was like totally panicked over it because I didn't want to lose my guy's weapon because that was like his signature thing. And even though it sucked in those days, it meant a lot to me. So,
Sure.
so I had gotten an Anor based bastard sword because I wanted to have the highest possible strength I could reasonably get, and that was it.
Okay.
And when I found out that that had never happened, or more to the point, I found out that DR existed.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I figured, oh, well, if they're selling stuff for cash, they're never going to break anything now. I might as well come back. And so that
Sure.
was sort of my attitude. Like, well, my cash money will protect my investment. So I might as well see what's going on.
Makes sense to me. So you said you kept checking in, expecting to see the game had died. That's actually a fairly common thing I've heard from a lot of people. What would if you had to? I'm putting you on the spot here. Why do you think Gemstone has lasted the longest as it has?
I think I've always thought it's the ability to like do your own adventure kind of thing in your own head. And no other game really, because, like I remember trying to get friends in the Gemstone over the years, and they always got the same thing, no graphics. And I'm like, well, no. And this was back when it was competing with WoW and things like that. And no one else could really be convinced. And the reason why was I was trying to explain to them, well, I mean, in your head, it's got bad graphics. In my head, it's whatever I imagine it to be. So,
Right.
and I think that's really the key, that the idea is that it's more customizable, and your character and your experience is more customizable than any other game out there. Like, that's just a fact. And that's the one true benefit of the text format, right? That you don't have to make a graphic for anything. You can just write a line. And if it's well written, then it has the effect you want. And I think that never ending sort of customization, I think, is the actual end game for Gemstone. I think, when you see people walking around with, 40 million XP on a character, you have to ask yourself what keeps them going. And I think for a lot of them, it is like chasing that next whatever thing that might come up, and they'd like to get their hands on it and maybe tell another portion of their story going forward for whatever that means for them. So that's what I really think has done it over the years.
I gotcha. Yeah, I could definitely see that. And I mean, that's something that can appeal to any kind of player as well. So it's like if you're like a combat oriented player, or even take it a step further, like a magic oriented character, then there's all kinds of customizations you can get. You can also always be chasing in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, whichever direction you want to go, there's something to chase. So I agree with that. I think I like your take on that.
The one player I have, one friend I did manage to convince to play, who I'm not going to name because he has a number of accounts, but Simontronics owes me because he has a number of accounts, and he, even him, he's the kind of guy, like when I used to D&D, when I D&D DM for him, I know that by third or fourth or fifth level he's going to scrap his character concept completely because he gets bored with it and he goes on to something else. And I always knew that if he ever got into Gemstone, like that would be to his strength, because like he loves trying all kinds of new things and wild ideas and crazy mechanical builds. But at the same time, he has a couple of things in game where he has chased certain alterations down because for him it makes him giggle, even if he's the only guy in on the joke. And I
Okay.
think
All right.
that's the strength of Gemstone. And every once in a while, in a Discord message or something, he'll paste me something that an ambient of one of his items did, and he's unbelievably amused by it. And I was like, well, that's the way it hooks you in, right? So that's the way it gets his claws into you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, put you on the spot here a little bit. You're
Mhm.
now in charge of Gemstone for 1 week, starting right now.
Okay.
I want you to give me one thing only that you would put into the game, and one thing that you would take out of the game, and why.
Thing I would put into the game, and one thing I would take out of the game.
Yep.
Um, You're catching me in a weird time because I really have felt very passionately about the loot system being a problem lately. And I know these recordings often try to be evergreen, but I put out a video on my YouTube channel about it, and I really think it's I don't know what it was. One day I was sitting around and I was just noticing, like, it just popped in my head about a month and a half ago. I said, "Man, the loot in this game doesn't matter at all. It just does not matter. Like every time I go to the
Yeah.
box pool, I don't care what's in it or not's in it, or like there's a reason why people will, script their entire loot process, without even looking at what's coming out of the box, and just set a couple of, parameters on how much this is worth, how much that, because they know there's nothing in it worth worrying about. And I think it's a real miss, because in any RPG, rewards have to be a pillar. Like there has to be a reward. Like, the cycle has to include rewards, because otherwise, why are people doing it? And I think um obviously people have dealt with it for 20 plus years, right? But I think like
Sure.
just the one aspect of the game that seems to have grown the least for me, it just has not grown. And if anything, it's gotten more and more restrictive. And so, I don't pretend to know the details about how everything would be, what are the unintended consequences of things if you remove this or put that in. But I certainly like to see loot pressure go. I'd like to see any system where a player's behavior, good or bad, is negatively impacting another player. And to me, that's what loot pressure is. If you have a player who can play 25 hours a day, I know there's no 20, their characters
Oh
on
yeah.
all the time.
Yep.
And if they're able to do that and they can manage the script checks, or they're actually at the computer somehow, great, good for you. Why should that mean that your player who can log in for 2 hours a day gets less rewards than if they logged in, because that player is always logged in? And that's just,
Sure.
it was a system built for a different time, which is true of a lot of Gemstone, but it's such a core pillar of rewards in an RPG. I feel like that's got to go.
I gotcha.
What would I put into the game? What would I put in for me, or what would I put in for the game?
It's you answer the question however you want to answer it. This
All
is
right.
your interview.
You made me smirk before, so I'll bring it up selfishly. There is a ton of customization for spellcasters in the game. Everything up down into you can summon a Twinkie mana bread. There is zero customization for physical characters in the game, and I have been well aware and been told that that's a coding challenge and difficult to do. and I don't know anything about coding. I teach social
Sure.
studies and economics, and I'm a college professor, and that's what I do. But um, it seems to me like the kind of thing, like I said, if you're chasing that vision of what your character might be, a system like that, one, I think would sell because the spell customizations obviously do.
Sure.
And two, I think it would benefit a wide swath of the game. That said, do I think it's the most important thing the game needs right now? I don't. But
Yeah.
if you're asking me what I'd like to see, I'd like to see that.
Sure. That perfectly valid answer. I'll freely admit to that to baiting you earlier by throwing out customizations. I know that's a hot button of yours. I figured I'd give you the chance to campaign for it. Okay, so what would you say? And actually, so I shared some of these questions with you earlier, but I'm going to
Mhm.
expand on a couple of them as we go through. So
Sure. I really, be honest, I only kind of glanced at them. So go ahead. This is all kind
okay,
of
okay.
stuff.
So I'm going to ask you two flip sides of the coin for this next question.
Sure.
So and I'll leave it to you. I'm going to ask you what's your favorite memory as a player, not from your character, your favorite memory as a player, you sitting there at the keyboard, your favorite memory as playing Gemstone. And I'm also going to ask you what your least favorite is, and I'll let you answer whichever one you want to answer first.
All right. Um, the favorite one's so hard because there's so much like recency bias to it, you know?
Oh, sure.
I could do the least favorite's pretty easy. My
Okay.
least favorite moment in Gemstone was during the Griffin Sword saga. And I distinctly remember always feeling like I was trying to get involved in the story. Now, I was a kid, however old I
Sure.
was, whatever it was, I was a kid, whether I was in college or whatever it was, I was a kid. And
Yeah.
I remember distinctly feeling like there's just no inroad here. It felt very gate kept. It felt like um, I didn't know even how to begin to get involved. And I had no notions about when this was going to happen or when that was going to happen. And there was nothing like scheduled times. And it always felt like there were people in the know and people not in the know. And I felt like that was an impossible bridge. And it made me really not want to be a part of it because it just felt it. That's whether people meant it or not, it came across that way to me. And I
Absolutely.
really, really didn't enjoy much of it. I mean, I kind of enjoyed sort of sitting in the sidelines and having commentary on the growing story around the world, um, but I remember being on the airship for the finale of that thing. Um, and it was I showed because that part I believe was announced. And I felt so utterly lost. And I really had tried to keep up with the storyline and all the various NPCs and whose NPC flag are you behind and all. And it just I don't know. For me, I know there are people who love it, and it was for them the opposite. They probably say it's their favorite moment. I was in the crowd of people who felt like that was the special story for the special club, and if you weren't in the special club, you weren't getting it. Now
I
that could have
gotcha.
very well been my failings as a role player. It could have been because I was a kid and didn't really know what I was really saying or doing or how to do it. But that's what it felt like to me.
Gotcha.
Um, my best memories, I take my best memories are kind of like a collection of memories from like very early in the game when I really didn't know what the hell I was doing. And the goofiness of it all was like what drew me in. Like
Sure.
the
I think we all
time,
remember our first time hunting kobolds and watching them like push each other over and stuff like that. It makes the
yeah,
game pop.
absolutely. Even like stumbling through the commands, like I distinctly remember like day two, I didn't know how to give things to people. Like I don't know what
Okay.
commands I was typing in, but it was wrong. And some guy says to me, "Can you hold this clade for me? Because I'm gonna go get my other character and could you give it to him?"
Sure.
And I was like, sure. And so he shows up with his other character. I was nobody. I didn't know the guy. I was just a stranger. And he's just, could you help me?
Yeah.
And I couldn't figure out the command to give it to him, and I panicked. So I ran away with his clade.
Oh no.
And then in a further panic, I went to, I don't know how, but I found some guys at a table. Again, I didn't know anybody.
Yeah.
And this guy had bought an Alexandrite greatsword when you could still get weapons customized with like ridiculous, like
Okay.
gold or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I thought I was slick as could be. I was like, "Oh, I'll trade you this clade for that great sword." And the guy's like, "That's a good weapon. This weapon's stupid." I'm like, "No, it's fine." So I'm like fencing this weapon off just to like clean my hands of it and launder the clade and get rid of it. And
Launder the clade. I love
yeah,
it.
I couldn't even figure out how to give it to him. I just dropped the clade, took the weapon, and I used that for a little while until I don't know what I found. But that like stories like that, those were
Oh
always
yeah.
those fun little charming stories that just can't happen in any other game. That's the thing that only can happen in Gemstone.
Absolutely. I just to share an anecdote just because I'm inspired. I mean, so I've at various times tried to get my whole family involved in Gemstone at various, and it hasn't really stuck for anybody.
Right.
But my older boy, he's now 18 years old, and when I first got him started, like it was day one, and I'm trying to do this massive data dump to him. It's like, okay, there's 800 million things you got to know. I'm trying to sort of dissolve that down into just try and learn these 30 things and
Hmm.
we'll get going.
Right.
And wandering around Ice Mule is my hometown. I will always, that's where I'm from. That's where my characters are from.
Hmm.
I am hardcore. So we're in Ice Mule and a merchant gets announced. Surprise merchant, Gald, everybody run over there. So I'm like, oh man, let's go. I'm trying to, this is exciting. And damn if he didn't get spun first. Very first person spun. And he's asking me, what do I get done? And I was like, it's up to you, dude. It's it's your character, whatever you want to do. He had no idea. He ended up, he got his Drake Falchion altered with a rat hide pelt around it.
All right.
And I'm like,
Better than my first one. That's good.
okay, okay. Well, now you got me curious. What was your first alteration? Do you remember?
I do. Very much. It was,
Okay,
to be honest, this could be one of those like best memories things. So
okay,
there was a GM. I didn't know there were a GM. No one did. Who was in Town Square in Landing, just asking for basic player new help. Hi, I'm kind of new here. Does anybody want to help me? And I had nothing. I had no alterations, no nothing. I
okay.
never, I didn't have, I don't know, whatever it was, I never quite figured out how to even do those things, like where to find them, how to get them. Um, the whole take a day off of work or school and sit around and wait thing just was something I just never ever did. So I never
Sure.
had anything. And I said, sure, and the person was like, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? Yeah, no problem. I said, well, look, why don't we go to a table and I can explain everything there because it's kind of, rather than this busy town market. And when we get to the table, the GM kind of takes off the mask and says, hey, listen, I'm a GM and I'm trying to encourage players to help new players. So for your kindness, I want to give you an alteration. Now, to me, I felt like I hit the GS Lotto because
Sure,
I had nothing.
absolutely.
I had nothing like that, nothing at all. And so he's like, "What do you want?" And what do you have? I didn't have anything. I didn't want anything. I never even thought of such a thing.
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing was I had gotten that bastard sword made of Anor because I wanted to
Okay.
do something about breakage. And at the time I wasn't even using it because I was using like some black great sword I found in an invasion back when invasion monsters used to drop like
Oh,
4x weaponry or something like that.
I missed that.
Yeah, I that's what I had. So
Okay.
this to me this was like the unusable item because like the other thing at least was like plus 20 and this was plus 18, whatever it was, but I was
Right.
like trying to prepare for the future kind of thing. And so I gave him that bastard sword, and I said, "Look, I really have no idea." So all he did was make it a rune etched bastard sword. That's all he did with it.
Okay.
And he gave it back. He gave it. I thought it was the greatest damn thing in the world. Now
Sure.
later, when and ever since I kept that sword, and so I would use it, even though it wasn't as good as the other one. I mean, plus two AS to me meant the world, but even though it wasn't as good, I
Sure.
used it. And later on, when I learned a bit more about alterations and how things work, I had it re-altered. But that is still the same sword I have today.
Oh, very nice.
That GM is still the same. He's the one who made Dusk my guy's sword. And otherwise, it would have just sat there as a burnished Anor bastard sword or Espadon or whatever it would have been.
Yeah.
People told me over and over, bastard swords suck. They're dumb. Don't use them. What's wrong with you? But to me, I didn't care. Like this meant a lot to me, and
Sure.
that's why I kept it. And that's why I mean, today it's been upgraded a million times. But I'm
Yeah.
I'm a psychopath. I'm the person who I had it, flares added, flares removed, to this sword that when I came back to the game after COVID, it was a plus 21 bastard sword with iron right flares because I got lucky and I got spun at iron right once.
Okay.
That was it. That's all it was. And that's been my weapon for since 2000, something like that. And
Okay.
it's never going anywhere. Like that's it. That's the weapon. I don't
Sure.
if it works or doesn't work. It's the weapon.
Sure. A lot of people like to throw around. I'm sure you've seen it a million times. Like, oh, you all you need in this game is 4x gear, and in some ways, that's a conversation that can be had from either direction. But at its bare bones, they're not wrong. You can make almost anything work. So if you've got something you're attached to like that, yeah, I mean, you can absolutely make it work. I mean, is it going to be the absolute best? Maybe not. But if it makes you happy, then so be it.
Yeah, I mean it's a very good weapon now, but I
Well,
saw someone
yes,
mention that whole Forex thing recently on Discord, and I like the response one of the users gave, which was, "You could do it, but will you have fun doing it?" And that's a good question.
that's
I feel like that's a question we don't ask often enough. You can do it, but is it going to be fun? And I think it is fun to move on from Forex, especially when you're handed it, by every player in the game the moment you log in.
sure, sure. What would you say? So the Iron Right flares, would you say that's your biggest win to date in Gemstone? like as a player? I mean, I know you've pretty much done
No,
the one
it
character.
was for ages, but no, I
Okay.
have not. I mean, for my character and the way he's sort of his story arc and everything, I think winning the spin for T4 Von Armor when there was like three people who could get it and you had to have
Oh,
T3, I mean, but which one meant the most? The Iron Right flares meant the most, for sure.
gotcha.
For sure. It took a lot for me to part with Iron Right on that weapon. Like I removed the script eventually and put Animal on it, which was way more expensive than I should have spent, but that's how attached I was to that particular piece of text data that
Sure.
even though people were like, you could get the same damn sword, just start over and re-alter it. I said, no,
No.
I'll know, I can't do it.
Yeah.
But the Iron Right flares felt the biggest for sure.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Okay. What's your favorite town currently,
Currently, Solhaven.
and why?
It's
Just out of curiosity.
it's the right mix for me. It's got players who are on a similar wavelength that tend to frequent it. I like that it kind of has a sort of generally out of the way feel without being completely disconnected. Like
Sure.
I find I was a landing guy until I came back. I always was. And it's just the culture of the landing just isn't what it was when I left, and that's fine. And I was looking around like what would be a place. I don't like totally sleepy dead places. I like to go to the main gathering point and there's somebody there and
Yeah.
they're not asleep. And so Solhaven I think has a lot of that. It feels like that to me. So that's why I enjoy it, and it's helped that most of the players who frequent in there have always they've been very very kind to me since I've returned. I've been very lucky that way. So
Nice.
that's kind of why I like it. Plus, I do a lot of OSA, and it seems to me like the natural biggest port in the region kind of thing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Okay. So that kind of brings us to the end of what I had for out of character stuff.
Sure.
I'm gonna flip the script here, and now I'd like to talk more about more in character stuff. This is easier for you because you've primarily just got your one main, and he's been, if I'm not mistaken, he's been your main all the way through, correct?
That's it. He went demonic 3 times.
Okay.
Yeah, his first name was Cassavir, which I stole from a local funeral home called Cassavir Funeral Home.
Okay.
And then he went demonic because I didn't know what I was doing. And then I tried my own name just to figure out the game I figured. And then he went demonic. Then I tried another name that was another spelling of my name. And then he went demonic. And the guy who survived was me adding Jaysehn instead of Sen. And that's the guy we have. So he's been the same guy the whole way through. He just went demonic a few times.
Okay. So what is Jason's origin story? So like what before
Oh,
he
okay.
entered Alanthea,
Mhm.
what's his backstory? Give us that, please.
All right, I try to avoid it a lot nowadays because back when I first made him, again, I'll take the fifth that I was a kid. Um, I wanted to have him be like a foreigner, like a complete foreigner to the entire thing. And back then, not all the docs were really written, and a lot of the places were just names on the map.
Yeah,
So I came up with this way, way overboard backstory about how he was from a whole different continent. I had a website. It was one of those little affiliate websites that used to be in the bottom of the play.net. It was
the
there.
the GeoCities websites.
Yeah, it was mine was geez, I don't remember what the heck was hosting it, but I had it and I made a map. I mean, I learned some Photoshop myself to do it. I made maps of the continent. I wrote up histories of all the countries. I mean, I was a budding history major, so like, I guess it was kind of,
Sure.
part of it. But I mean, it wasn't anything good. It was pretty ridiculous. But that was his backstory. That he's a foreigner from another country who fled home um, because of a family struggle,
Okay.
and he was looking to basically train up, get power of some kind, so he can go back and take care of his family and sort of get revenge. That he was kind of like an edgy boy revenge story at first.
Okay. So I admit to some inside knowledge here, so I'm going to jump the gun a little bit and just go
Mhm.
straight to what is it about Voln, be it the spirit or the organization, that speaks so strongly to Jason?
It's really two things, I guess. The first one is that, again, in my backstory, I was a big Ravenloft fan. So, I mean, again, I'm not going to pretend. Uh, Jason's based on an NPC from Ravenloft. I used to, that's a guy called George Weathermay. He's not my
Okay.
guy. He's an official guy in the thing, combined with a few other bits and bobs of fantasy, whatever the hell I came across over the years.
Sure.
Um, and so the idea was that his family back home are basically necromancers. That's like their calling, that's
Okay.
what they're good at. And Jaysehn wasn't. Jaysehn has no mana. He can't cast any spells. He's terrible at it. So he figures to beat the necromancers, I need the undead slayer's abilities. So at first it was very transactional. And it stayed that way really until my break. And then with my break, when I came back, I figured, well, there's 15 years of gap here. Like this story's got to get filled in. Like I don't know what
Sure.
the hell he was up to for 15 years. So I kind of took a risk and I said, well, suppose he went home and he finished his story. Like he
Okay,
went
yeah.
home and he had it out with his family and so ta-da, he won. But now what? You know, I it was funny. What came to mind, this is gonna sound ridiculous, but I remember there used to be the TV show, the cartoon TV show Aladdin.
Oh yeah.
Disney did a cartoon TV show, and there was a character in it. I'll never forget this. Who was who was basically like a Captain Ahab insert, where he was chasing some desert whale thing, and he wanted to
Okay.
kill it. This was the cartoon plot. So maybe somebody who's watched Disney Aladdin cartoon may remember this. And in the end of the cartoon, he catches the whale,
Okay.
and then he doesn't know what to do now. Like your whole
Sure.
existence was this mission. You've accomplished it. What do you do? So he let the whale go in the cartoon so that way he could
Okay.
continue his, the idea was like, without this whale, I got no life. I have no purpose. So off he went. So I figured, so what happens if Jaysehn has no purpose? Well, he does have a purpose. His purpose is he made a deal. And the deal was, you give me these powers, I will fight undead for you. And
Okay.
so that's become his like duty. And now he's much more of a willing servant as opposed to like transactional. But that's kind of the idea that he feels like his end of the bargain was met. So he's a dyed in the wool, cradle to the grave Volner now.
Gotcha. Okay. Next one up is one that I'm pretty sure I could answer for you, but just to give you the opportunity to do so officially. What's Jason's favorite place to be and why?
Hmm. I don't actually know. That's hard.
Really?
Well, yeah. What did you think it'd be?
Oh, I figured it was one of two, honestly. I figured it was either
Okay.
gonna be at the helm of his ship or the monastery on Four Winds. One or the other. But I've been wrong at least once or twice before in my life, so
Uh, well, no, I don't. I mean, I'm trying to think like rooms in the game. Like that's what I'm trying to
yeah,
think.
yeah.
Um, that's a tough one. I honestly, I think his favorite place to be, if I had to pick a room, it
Hmm.
would be the Shrine of Dreams. I've always liked
Oh,
that room.
nice.
I've
Okay.
always, whenever like I wanted to AFK Jaysehn out or I wanted to go role play something, I would usually go there. I don't know what it is. I thought the writing of that room was really, really, really cool. I always liked it. I was always drawn to it.
It is. It's beautiful.
It's the spot where I had my sixth when my guy got his sanctification done on his weapon,
Hmm.
he did a little pilgrimage, and that the final one, the S6, I did in that shrine. So I think it'd be there. I mean, if I had to pick a spot, like a spot
Yeah.
to be there.
Okay.
The thing like his ship, that's like going to work. You know what I mean? Like
Oh, okay.
that's like the office. So yeah, I would probably still pick that place. Of all the rooms in the game, I would say that's the spot. I don't go
So
there often anymore, but it never leaves my mind.
let me ask you this. So just because I'm curious now, so you're saying
Mhm.
Jason views, going to his ship as going to work.
Mhm.
So does he enjoy OSA or do you enjoy OSA or both? Or does he just consider it his duty?
No,
I'm curious what are his feelings on it.
he enjoys it to the extent that he's very good at it. Is sort of his attitude.
Okay.
In because he was going back and forth between continents. There was another player who was role playing an Ashram descendant for ages, and so I remember years ago when I wasn't even playing Gemstone, he emailed me and said, "Can I use your guy in a backstory on something I'm working on that I took him on his voyage home?" I said, "Sure."
Yeah.
We had mentioned that before. So my attitude as well, if he sailed on this guy's ship for months and months and months, he probably would have learned seamanship along the way, and this was his good buddy. So that's kind of the attitude. So he definitely enjoys it. But for him, it's
Okay.
also like, the floating monastery, like no one in the order is doing this at sea. There are ghost ships out there. Someone's got to do this. I guess this will be my territory.
Okay. That makes sense. Um, is, I know the answer to this, but is Jason married?
He is.
And to whom and how did that come about?
Akenna. And it came about actually on like my third day back. Was why I met her. I was I don't even know where I was. I was in somewhere, and I was looking for just highlighted names that people who I kind of knew from back in the day.
Okay.
And the one I came across, Triva, who I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, and she was highlighted. And I remember she was pretty far down on my friends list, which means that she was one of my later highlights.
Okay.
These were all people who had started the game or had started alts back when I was like checking out of the game and had been there already for 10 years. And I think she pretended to recognize me. I was probably on her highlight list or something too.
Sure.
And
Sure.
it's like, hey, how have you been? And I'm like, oh, how are you? I'm like, who the hell is this? I don't remember
Right.
anymore. You know. And Kenna just happened to walk into the room. I don't remember the event. I think it was a little bit before one of the pay events. I didn't know anything about pay events yet.
Okay.
And just chatting or whatever. And there was gonna be some sort of ball in Illistim or maybe Valor. I don't remember. And we met that way. And
Okay.
it's been great ever since.
So we probably already touched on this, but what would Jaysehn, if you were to ask Jaysehn what is his most treasured possession, what would he say and why?
Still probably his sword.
The sword. Yeah, the
Yeah,
sword's
I
good.
mean,
Yeah.
aside from things that are like, eh,
Not the hat? Come on, the hat is
no, not the
iconic.
hat. The hat's funny because he in his story he bought the hat because when he arrived from his country, he arrived in Taloenthra and it was raining and he needed something to keep the rain off his head. So he bought the first hat he could afford. He traded some of his father's rubies for a hat, and that's his hat.
That's
So
hilarious.
that's it. That's the story behind the hat. And yeah, he would always have a hat, but it's is it Indiana Jones-ish? It's a little bit, but the sword
Sure.
puts so much effort into that weapon. I would say the sword for sure.
Gotcha. That's that's funnier than it might be to other people for me because just a little side anecdote here. I actually my family and I made a trip up to New York City not too long ago.
Hmm.
My family is from Massachusetts. We are
Oh,
I'm a hardcore Boston fan for most
oh,
Boston
Jesus
sports.
God. See, now we
And
can't continue the interview. This is horrible.
well, I already got you on
But you're a Red
tape for at
Sox
least half.
fan?
So I am a Red Sox fan. I'm a
Oh, come
Celtics
on.
fan, and I'm a
Oh,
diehard Patriots fan.
oh, you're like
Um,
the worst combo. You're lucky. Oh,
yeah.
God, it's terrible. All right.
Well, so but anyway, we're in New York City, and
Hmm.
it's a million degrees just because we decided that we were going to walk down to the Statue of Liberty, which was a huge mistake. We walked, pretty much the whole length of the island. It was something like 7.5 miles, something like that,
Hmm.
and I was just dying. And I was getting sunburned because I don't have any hair, so my head was
Hmm.
getting sunburned. And I was like, and so I found myself in that instance, kind of like Jaysehn, where it's like, I need a hat. I have to get a hat. And the only thing I could find was a New York City black ball cap. And I wore it the rest of
Oh,
that trip.
man.
And I now own a New York City, me, a diehard Boston fan. I've got a New York City ball cap that I will still
Good.
wear.
That's
I, you
that's
know,
exactly what you deserve.
completely fair. Completely fair.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, so this is one that I don't know that Jaysehn would answer, so you may need to answer on his behalf.
Sure.
But what is Jaysehn most scared of and why?
Failure.
Failure. Anything in
He,
particular or
he's scared anytime he has responsibilities he can't live up to.
okay.
Because he's never viewed himself as a leader. He doesn't think of himself as a leader. He's never had leadership ambitions. He's never tried to be. He's always been a solo agent for pretty much forever.
Okay.
And even the whole fleet thing kind of organically grew. It wasn't like I had a plan for it. It was more or
Yeah.
less like, oh, the boat could be kind of fun. And Jaysehn probably knows how to sail. Let's get a sloop. Oh, I got more friends than two friends. Let's get a brigantine. Oh, crap, that's not big enough. Let's get a carrack. Oh, Jesus, God, it fills up every time. Let's get and that's what happened. And
Okay.
it wasn't really planned that way. I know it's become like the thing, but it wasn't. Um, so I think for him, it's failure. He has a lot of, he enjoys his guilt a little too much, probably. He's the
He's
kind
a
of guy
little
who,
emo. That's
yeah, he likes to brood. He definitely likes to sit in the corner and like assume that it's all his fault, even if it had nothing to do with him.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
so various different ways. So leadership is not something he's comfortable with because he doesn't like he never. It's even kind of true even when I'm playing. Like if I'm in a group of people, I just try to keep everybody alive. That's all I try
Yeah.
to do with my character. I don't. When I'm alone, I throw caution to the wind and do whatever the heck I want, and whatever happens, happens. But with a group, I feel really responsible to make sure everybody gets in, out, and safe, and etc. And so that's it. It kind of plays into the character a little bit, in that he doesn't want responsibility really. He recognizes that he kind of has to have it at this point.
Sure.
But now that he has it, he won't accept failure. He'll do whatever he can to stop failure.
Okay. Well, to play off that a little bit, does Jaysehn have any big failures that have that in his mind that where he failed pretty strongly and that like kind of influences that? Are there any failures in his backstory that
Oh yeah,
kind of influence
tons.
that?
Tons. In his backstory, his first wife was murdered because he was tricked by an illusion. That's sort
Oh,
of
okay.
his sort of why he hates magic quite so much. Um, he oh so many. Even when he wins, he thinks
Gotcha.
he's losing. Like probably one of the big ones is the way the entire crew of native Four Winds Island occupants got fireballed when they were using cannons to stop the Kralvin. And anything like that, things even where other people are like, well, that's the cost of success. Jason's like, that's too high, and
Gotcha.
that's why he'd rather go alone. That's always his thing. Like he doesn't invite people into Vol, never. He tells them. I mean, if a player wants to do it, I'll invite them because I don't want the player to feel like I'm a jerk. But I'll
Sure.
do a whole role play spiel like you really don't want this life. Like this is not, go back to farming, like this is not
Yeah.
for you. So he doesn't like that responsibility that he sort of, I made this person a member of Vaughn, and now, there they are in crypts and getting killed by undead, and whatever happens happens.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that makes sense. I just have one more that I had pre-written. We might
Sure.
riff a little bit after this, but
Yeah, whatever.
so what would you say, or what would, well, no, this is probably you need to answer for him. So what
Okay.
is Jason searching for? And as relate and sort of along with that, what does his end game look like? At what point does he feel like his arc is finished with the understanding that this is Gemstone? It probably never will be, but
Never
what,
will.
what's
Um,
he searching for? What's his end game look like in his perfect world?
oh man, see, that's the problem. So, okay, so Jason's answer is going to be for sure that he doesn't get to decide that. That's fate.
Oh, okay.
That's not up to him. He wouldn't even attempt to even dream about the perfect world because for him, anything like that is like you're inviting disaster.
Interesting.
You're not allowed to have those kind of ambitions. Like you can strive for things, but you can't be like, I'm going to work until I make this so. Like that's not allowed. That's too far.
Oh, okay.
So for him, he would never admit to anything like that.
Very
Honestly,
interesting.
and from a player perspective, I don't think he really has an end goal at this point. Like he's doing his job. He's living his end goal. Living the dream. He's living the dream. He's a
Okay.
Volner doing Voln stuff, and that's what he's supposed to do. And where he can be helpful in other areas, he always tries to be. I definitely play him more as like a kind of a grim white hat kind of guy nowadays than I did back in the day.
Yeah.
And I'm comfortable with that. I think he's in a good place. I have a lot of fun with him, or I would have put him down a long time ago. But he would never admit to any goals or anything like that. No, nothing that profound. No way.
Okay. A couple softballs just off the top of my head here.
Sure.
What's the best hunting ground in the game today, and why?
Hinterwilds. It's the best one. Eve, I really, really, one of the things I was really hoping for, I was one of the people really pushing for Spell Disabler thing because I feel like there's a whole segment of the game that is missing out on the best designed combat fun in Gemstone.
Okay.
Uh, Orchan's work there is really remarkable. He blended a lot of variety of creatures, a lot of variety of area, and yet it doesn't feel like a puzzle. It feels like it's put together intentionally. It feels like it's like a narrative area. It all fits up to these halflings, how they're surviving, what happened to the ones in the wilderness, what's causing all this. You can go and see freaking Zeroth, like which is like if you're a player from my era, that's like I remember fighting that jerk, and getting killed by him.
Yeah.
So when you see like this larger than life enemy has actually become a narrative part of the world, that feels like the kind of resolution I expect an NPC of that caliber to have. Like this
Okay.
ultra arch villain is now the source of a massive evil in the north. Like that sounds great to me. It's a
Yeah.
ton of fun. It's challenging. It's the kind of combat I enjoy. I find a lot of other grounds kind of really boring. The whole whack it and it's dead hunting grounds, I really don't like. Like they're too quick, they're too simple. I kind of like long drawn out combat.
Okay.
So for me, it's by far and away the best one.
Interwatts. Okay. Makes sense. The only one I was going to throw out at you, which you kind of already answered there, what would you say your most enjoyable level range is
Right.
or was? Is it right
Right.
now? Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody told me you're gonna hate Cap. I don't good. I'm sorry. I don't. And that was true even before all the warrior upgrades came in. I enjoy GS combat. I'm one of those weird people. I mean, people tell me all the time, "Oh, I would never do this combat. I got to script it. I can't do it." I really enjoy it. I'm like some keyboard warrior. Everything's bop, 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 really clacky.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah.
I really do enjoy it. So for me, it's one of the most fun combat systems in video gaming. That might seem ridiculous, but I really believe that.
I gotcha. I gotcha. Well, that's what I had. That's what I had pre-written. I think we're doing good on time. Let me see. I got a timer here. I think I should. Okay. This full disclosure. This is an addendum to a previous session that Jayson's player joined me for. This is going to be stitched together, but I wanted to explain the costume changes that are going on. This is just a little bit of extra information I wanted to get on the record. So thank you for be back and say that again. Thank you for being willing to do this once again for me.
Sure, happy to be here.
So first off, I want to talk to you about you've been at the forefront of some player-run role play opportunities here recently. There have been a couple things that I've seen posted on Discord. It sounds really neat. I'm really glad to see that kind of thing happening. I think that's something that there's been a lot of room for in the game for a while. So glad to see that happening. What gave you the idea, and how do you feel like it's going?
Um, what gave me the idea? Well, another player, and I don't want to mention anybody by name, but another player had done something a little bit of a larger scale in the EN last year. And it was like it seemed like it was like I really wasn't involved in it except that I knew about it. And it was I want to say at least a week or two, maybe longer, of like once a week sessions or a couple times a week. I really don't know the exact details, but at the time I was like, that's cool. That's neat. And I felt like, something like that would be kind of interesting if there was a way to empower players to kind of do the day-to-day on the spot kind of storyline thing. I've been a D&D DM for, I don't know, 30 something years. And I've always been drawn to storytelling. It's how I got into my profession as a historian and a teacher. So for me, it was something that I always wanted to do, but I wasn't really sure, one, if there'd be even any interest or an audience in it. And then two, if there's any real way to pull it off other than like a bunch of act usage in the game. And recently, between the introduction of free to play accounts, which allow me to make a couple of easy NPCs that I can kind of just toss out there, a much wider range of available clothing that's just off the shelf. So it looks good enough to get a kind of a thematic dress together for a particular character. And then the introduction of a lot more props, just things that are functional, whether they're things that you can bury or things that look like something has been buried or something along those lines, or discrete containers, which I made a lot of use of in both of the storylines I put together, because no one could see the NPC withdraw this item or make this item go away. It just suddenly appeared. And that was
Okay.
really helpful. So just kind of knowing a lot of the materials of what's available in the game, how you could use them, what sort of how you might do them. I really wanted to introduce something that was like a single night of a story where you show up and hell or high water, this story is over tonight. And
Gotcha.
I feel like that lets anybody jump in, because this story, whatever happens to be, will have nothing if except maybe and it was very tangential connections to a previous story. Nothing is needed to be known. And even when people say that about a lot of gemstone storylines, oh, you don't need to know anything to get involved, that's never true. It's just never true, because you feel like you don't know things and other people
Yeah.
are using words and names and events and etc. And if you don't know, you don't know, and you
Yeah.
feel lost and you feel out of touch and you feel like you're spending most of your time catching up. And I hated that feeling as a player. I still hate that feeling as a player. And a player can't be everywhere at all times. So I really like the idea of having something that players can just get involved in, do, and to the extent to which any player really has enjoyed themselves, if the experience and the NPCs or anything like that have any sort of connection to the player that goes beyond that night, great. If it was just a night of fun, I'm okay with that too. So that's what I want to do, and I kind of use some really basic storylines, the kind of things that are not world shattering. They are very simple. They are small
Yeah.
scale kind of stuff. And that was what I reached for. And we did it twice, and I think they were both pretty successful. They seem to be well received. And yeah, so that's why I did it.
Nice, nice. I would you mentioned a couple times that you've got some experiences at D&D DM. Would it be fair to call these things sort of like what most people would consider one shot if they're just
Yeah, that
one
was kind
gamers?
of the idea. Yeah, the idea was like a
Okay.
one shot. I'm never going to be able to do something like have, I don't know, maybe I can one day. I'd have to think about it, but I can't think of too many ways to have like a meaningful combat situation emerge. Although I did
Yeah.
kind of kind of with the last one I did, because the basic plot was somebody had more or less kidnapped somebody. And in order to give the illusion that they had thugs working for them, I actually had a friend of mine, because I knew I would not have my character with the group that went to go find the kidnapper because I'm playing the NPCs. So I
Sure.
had a friend, one of the other people in our MHO, which is this has become sort of like a signature event of our MHO, for lack of a better term. Just
Okay.
so I have a group of people who work with me, and it's kind of the idea of adventure, so I liked it. Anyway, I had her go out and get a bandit bounty
Oh,
that would be
nice.
on the road from where they were starting to where the final end result would be. So
Okay.
and she knew to walk slowly as she led the group, so that way the group would get hit by bandits, and it had the impression like she had thugs waiting in ambush kind of thing.
Nice.
It seemed to work. The party seemed to buy into it, which was
Sure.
great. Either they're good sports or whatever.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's definitely a one shot sort of thing. Like, it's come
Gotcha.
in small scale, it resolves in one night, and then we move on. And then in a month and a half or 2 months later, we'll do another one, that sort of thing.
I gotcha. I gotcha. So you do have plans to do more of this and keep this going. That's your intention, right?
Yeah, my current sort of work schedule with Gemstone is to try to do like a video every other month, at least no later than that. And then maybe see about interspersing one of these adventures in the middle, because they do take some time to do. The
Sure.
videos take a lot of time depending on what I'm doing. If it's like more of a vignette thing, it's pretty much it's a lot of work. If it's more of a
Yeah.
guide, it's pretty easy because it's just mostly me talking. So every month I'm trying to release something, whether it's an adventure in the game or a video or just some sort of like, adding to the community experience of Gemstone is sort of the plan.
That's great. That's great. I love to see that. Um, okay. Well, I appreciate you running through that.
Sure.
Wrapping up, again, full disclosure, this was your idea as something to append to these, and I loved it, so I'm rolling with it. And now I'm going to put you to the question. Got 10 questions for
That
you.
wasn't part of the idea. All right.
Well, hey, hoist by your own petard here.
That's my
So
life.
tell me about it. So I'm just going to clarify because previously, in the previous session, I was like, there was some session where I was talking to you, the player, others where I was
Mhm.
talking to, the character. These are for you. These are for the player. So I'd like to get your answers. They do not have to be gemstone related.
Okay.
I'd be surprised if they were, but I'm interested in hearing your answers to these questions.
All right.
Starting
I'll
off,
do my best.
what's your favorite word?
My favorite word. I didn't plan these out, by the way, so I don't know.
Okay, well, I'm glad.
My favorite word. Um, Creativity.
What's your least favorite word?
Hypocrisy.
Good one. Good one. What turns you on?
Um, Opportunities to be creative, for sure.
Okay. What turns you off?
When people tell me what to do. I don't play
Oh
nice with
man,
others. It's the way it is.
I I,
I
I hear you there.
Yeah.
What's your favorite curse word?
My favorite curse word. Oh man. Now see, that's tough. I grew up in Brooklyn. It's like the land of
I
curse words.
Sure.
Um,
You've got a PhD in this.
yeah, yeah. I think motherfucker is the best one. That's my
That's
favorite.
interesting. That's I'll be I've done one other one of these and recorded one other of these, and that was their choice as well.
There
So
you go. It's a winner.
absolutely. What sound or noise do you love?
Hmm. The sound of my kids.
What sound or noise do you hate?
The sound of my kids crying.
Yep. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Well, in high school, it was going to be three things: either teacher, lawyer, or priest. I don't think I would have made the cut for priest, so I'll go with lawyer.
That's hilarious. I laugh so hard at that because I was right there when I was in high school as well. I was actually on the path for seminary school, so I
Oh, were
understand
you?
completely.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
never works out, does it?
it never does. Uh, what profession would you not like to do?
Hmm. I would not be any good at anything where I have a production deadline and have to meet it.
Okay,
Well,
okay,
I don't know what that is because I've never done jobs like that unless no, never. I've quit them every time I tried them. No, I need to
okay,
have a lot of self-direction. I can't do stuff like that. Whatever it would be. Fill in the blank.
gotcha. Okay, and then if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Um, I want him to get Sister Elizabeth out of heaven, bring her to the pearly gates, and her and I are gonna have a fist fight to see who gets in and who gets out.
All right, all right. I'll allow
It's a
it.
long story. It's a long story. That's what I want.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, sir. Well, thank you very much again for your time. Thank you for doing this second session, and I'm going to get this posted here as soon as I can manage it.
Awesome. Thanks for having me again.